Have you ever felt yourself slowly disappearing from the life you used to move through so easily? Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but like a slow unfurling, the kind where one morning you reach for your shoes and realize you've forgotten how to tie them, or you walk into a room and wonder why you're there, or you look in the mirror and see someone familiar, but not quite the person you remember being. It doesn't happen with fanfare. It happens in the pauses, in the long silences that settle between once familiar conversations, in the way the body hesitates before standing, in the way time seems to stretch, not because you're busy, but because you're no longer in a rush to fill it. And perhaps that's where something sacred begins. You see, aging isn't just the wearing down of the body. It's the soft fading of roles, of routines, of assumptions. It's the quiet return to essence, like a tree in winter, shedding its leaves not because it's dying, but because it's becoming something still, something truer, something deeply alive in its stillness. I've spoken with many who are past 60. Some feel lost in this new terrain, where strength doesn't come as easily, where loved ones start to leave, and where life no longer feels loud and urgent, but soft and unfamiliar. But I've also spoken to others who found something unexpected here: clarity, stillness, a deeper kind of wisdom that only arises when everything else has quieted down. So if you're over 60, or even just feeling that quiet shift in your days, I'd like to walk with you for a while, not to offer answers or advice, but to share a few things I've learned, and maybe together we can discover that what feels like fading might actually be a form of becoming. Let's begin. Part 1. The slow fade of strength. The rise of awareness. There was a time when strength lived in my body like a quiet, loyal companion. It wasn't something I thought about. It was simply there, in the steady beat of my heart on morning walks, in the ease with which I lifted groceries, mowed the lawn, or climbed stairs 2 at a time just for the joy of it. I remember those years not with regret, but with a kind of awe, the way one looks at an old photograph and marvels at how effortless it all once seemed. At 60, I could still hike a good stretch of the Appalachian Trail. Not the whole thing, of course, but enough to feel the wind brush my cheeks and believe, if only for a moment, that my body could carry me anywhere my mind dreamed of going. But something shifted with time, slowly at first, like clouds drifting in over a summer sky, barely noticeable until the light changes. A few years ago, I began to notice the small hesitations, the moment before I rose from the couch, the quiet creak in my knees, the way I reached for the wall, just in case. And then one day, something as ordinary as walking to the kitchen felt like planning an expedition. I'd stand up, pause, measure my balance like a tightrope walker, and take the first step as though the ground might move beneath me. I began to double knot my shoes, not out of habit, but necessity. I carried a cane, not as a symbol of defeat, but as a quiet admission. The path has changed. People often talk about aging as if it's all about pain or decline, but pain is not the hardest part. No, the hardest part is the uncertainty. It's the moment you wonder, will my legs hold me today? Or what if I fall and can't get back up? I remember one quiet afternoon when a paperback slipped from my lap. I leaned forward to pick it up, and in doing so, lost my balance. I didn't break anything, thank heavens, but I couldn't get up. I sat there on the floor for 20 minutes, half laughing, half crying, not from injury, but from the realization that I no longer trusted my body the way I used to. That shook me, not because I felt old, but because I felt betrayed, as if my body had become something separate from me, unfamiliar and indifferent. At first I resisted it. Oh, I fought. I refused help. insisted on doing things myself, lifting things too heavy, climbing ladders I had no business climbing. I told myself it was about staying independent, but in truth, it was pride, plain and simple. I didn't want to admit that I needed help. I didn't want to become a burden. But then came the moment that broke me wide open and gently stitched me back together in a new way. It was my granddaughter, Emily. She was visiting one weekend, and we were heading out to lunch. I bent down to tie my shoes and my hands simply stalled. No strength, no coordination, just silence. She saw me struggling, knelt down quietly, and tied my laces without saying a word. There was no pity in her eyes, only presence. When she finished, she gave my shoulder a little pat and smiled, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I looked at her, and something inside me softened. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't even feel old. I just felt human, tender, and profoundly loved. That was the day I began to understand something I had missed all along. Accepting help is not the opposite of strength. It is the companion of trust. It is what allows us to remain connected, even as parts of us falter. In Buddhism, there is a gentle truth we often return to. To resist change is to suffer. To accept it is to find peace. And in that moment with Emily, I realized how much I had been resisting, how tightly I had been clinging to the man I used to be, instead of learning to embrace the one I was becoming. These days, I move slower, I sit more often, I pause before I act. And in that pause, I found something unexpected: awareness, clarity, a kind of mindful presence that never found me in my younger, faster years. Where once I moved through life, now I move with life. Every step a choice, every movement a meditation. And though I wouldn't have asked for this slower version of myself, I've come to see that he is not lesser, only deeper, quieter, and perhaps wiser. Part 2. The body becomes a stranger. There's something disorienting about looking at your own hands and realizing they don't quite feel like yours anymore. The skin is thinner now, etched with lines like riverbeds dried by time. The grip is looser, the response slower, and though the brain inside still feels quick, still catches jokes, remembers favorite songs, still dreams in vivid colors, the body doesn't seem to get the message anymore. It's as though the two of us, mind and body, are speaking different languages now. For most of my life, we were a team. My body and I trusted it without thought, and it responded without question. But lately, it hesitates, and so do I. There was a time I used to carry my grandchildren on my shoulders, their small fingers wrapped in my hair, their laughter ringing through the trees as I spun in circles. I was invincible back then, or so I believed. Strong, steady, reliable. Now I hold the stair rail with both hands and check the weather before stepping into the shower, whispering a silent prayer that the power doesn't go out while I'm in there. The smallest tasks, opening a jar, buttoning a shirt, standing on tiptoe, have become delicate negotiations with a body that once obeyed without a second thought. What's most painful isn't the slowness or the stiffness, it's the strangeness. The unfamiliarity of what used to be home. This body, this vessel, this lifetime companion has become a stranger. I still catch myself reaching for things as if I were 30, only to be reminded mid-motion that I am not. And in those moments, there's a quiet grief, not loud or dramatic, but steady, like background music I didn't ask to hear. I think this is what people don't prepare you for, not just the physical decline, but the emotional dislocation. The dissonance between who you feel you are and what your body tells you is now possible. The body, once your ally, becomes something to manage, to coax, to forgive. And yet, even in this betrayal, there is a peculiar tenderness, a deep, almost reverent awareness of how much this body has carried you through. In Buddhist thought, there's a beautiful metaphor that speaks to this. The body is like a raft. It's not who we are, it's not permanent. It's a means of transport across the river of life. We're meant to care for it, respect it, but not cling to it, not confuse it with our true self. And that metaphor has helped me more than I can say. When I feel frustrated with my aching knees or trembling hands, I remind myself, this raft has carried me far. It's weathered storms, crossed oceans of sorrow and joy. Of course it's a little worn, but it's still afloat. It's still getting me where I need to go. There's humility in tending to an aging body, in rubbing lotion into dry skin, in stretching slowly to ease tight joints, in letting go of the need to look the way I once did or move the way I once could. There's a quiet dignity in acknowledging, without shame, that I now require more time, more care, more rest. And in that shift, something unexpected has emerged. Compassion, not just for myself, but for others. I look at strangers on the bus, those who limp, who shuffle, who struggle with heavy doors, and my heart understands them in a way it never could when I was young and fast and strong. Aging has made me gentler, softer in the face, not just with others, but with myself. These days when I reach for a glass and my hand trembles, I don't scold it. I hold it with both hands and thank it for still trying. When I can't button my shirt on the first try, I take a breath and try again. And when I look in the mirror and see someone I barely recognize, I try to smile, not at the face I've lost, but at the soul that's still very much here, looking back at me. Because if I've learned anything from this body becoming a stranger, it's this: what is unfamiliar now was once a blessing taken for granted, and in recognizing that, I get to love it all over again. Part 3. The sound of absence. Living with what and who is no longer here. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the absence of someone who once filled a space so naturally that you didn't even notice their presence until it was gone. I still remember the sound of Margaret humming in the kitchen as she stirred the pot or rinsed the dishes. She wasn't a loud woman, far from it, but she had this way of filling a room with life, just by being in it. The clinking of her teacup, the rustle of her turning a page, even the rhythm of her breathing as she slept beside me, all of it stitched into the fabric of my days so thoroughly that I never imagined I'd have to live without it. But absence has a strange way of arriving. It doesn't barge in or announce itself with a cry. No, it drips, like water from a faucet left slightly open. At first, you barely notice. A forgotten word, a repeated story, a pause where there never used to be one. Then one day, Margaret looked at me with kindness, but not recognition, and called me by someone else's name, a name I didn't know, and she smiled at me like I was that man. That was the moment I knew she was leaving. Not in body, not yet, but in memory, in presence, in the quiet erosion of everything we had built together. Alzheimer's didn't take her all at once. It stole her piece by piece, like the tide pulling grains of sand from a castle we had spent a lifetime building. I lost her eyes before I lost her voice. I lost her scent on the pillow before I lost the way she said my name. Now the house echoes, not with noise but with the weight of memory. Her chair still sits across from mine in the living room, a soft armchair with a tear in the fabric she always meant to sew. No one uses it. I dust it once a week. That's all. I can't bear to move it, nor to sit in it. It's not just a chair. It's a placeholder for a presence that still lingers in the stillness. Sometimes I turn on the radio and play her favorite jazz records. Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong. I don't play them because I want to hear the music. I play them to imagine she's still here, watering the plants, folding the towels, humming under her breath, as if nothing ever changed. The notes curl around the air, and for a fleeting moment, the house feels whole again. They say grief is love with nowhere to go. I believe that. And yet, in the quiet of this house, I've learned that love does find its way. It returns through the most unexpected rituals. Every Friday, Margaret used to make apple pie. Not fancy, just simple, warm, with a buttery crust and too much cinnamon. She had a way of measuring the ingredients, not with spoons but with instinct. After she passed, I found her old red notebook in the kitchen drawer. The last thing she wrote, Friday, make apple pie. I make it now, every week, not because I crave the taste, but because in the act of peeling apples, in folding the dough, I feel her hands guiding mine. I feel her standing behind me, correcting my cinnamon, laughing when I make the crust too thick. That pie is no longer just a dessert. It's a promise, a prayer, a conversation between the living and the memory of love. In Buddhism, we are reminded of impermanence, anicca, that all things arise and pass away. But impermanence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means transformation. The people we've lost don't vanish. They become part of the air, the light, the scent of coffee in the morning, the song that starts playing just when you need it. They become the whisper in your chest that says, keep going, I'm still with you. And so, while my house is quiet, it's not empty. The laughter of old friends still dances in the hallways. The thump of Rufus, our old dog, still echoes in the corners of my memory. I still check his food bowl sometimes, forgetting he's gone, and then smile at my own forgetfulness. Because forgetting doesn't mean we don't care. It just means we've loved long enough that their presence is now stitched into us so deeply, we sometimes confuse it with our own. No, I'm not alone. I live with memories, with ghosts, if you like, but not the scary kind. The kind that sit with you gently, without needing to speak. The kind that hold your hand when you're sitting quietly at sunset, watching the maple leaves turn gold. The kind that remind you that, even in absence, love remains, and sometimes that is more than enough. Part 4. Conversations with Death, a companion we all share. For most of my life, death was a concept, an idea to explore, not an emotion to feel. As a young man, I spoke of it with academic curiosity, as though it were a historical event more than a human certainty. I taught about fallen empires and fading kings, about leaders whose names were once carved in stone and are now read only in textbooks. I thought of death as a period at the end of a long sentence, precise, predictable, clean, but at 94, death no longer feels like punctuation. It feels like a shadow, not a menacing one, but a presence that walks beside me quietly, like an old acquaintance I never took the time to know. It sits with me some evenings as the sun disappears behind the pine trees. It rides with me when I take the bus to the doctor. It lingers in the quiet, not to scare me, but to remind me I am getting closer. Oddly enough, I don't fear pain. I've lived through enough of it. Surgeries, losses, nights of loneliness, so thick it felt like they would swallow me whole. And I don't even fear the process really. What unsettles me most is something smaller, quieter, but heavier. I fear being forgotten, not in the grand sense. I've never hoped for statues or great legacies, but I fear the kind of forgetting where my stories fade into silence, where no one remembers how I liked my eggs, or the way I used to hum while washing dishes, or how I always read the newspaper aloud on Sundays with too much inflection. I fear becoming a name on a stone rather than a voice in someone's memory. I think about Joe Blake sometimes, an old friend from the war. We met in France. He was the kind of guy who couldn't shoot straight, but could make the whole squad laugh through anything. He once saved my life during a night patrol, pulling me back from a minefield with nothing but instinct and foolish courage. Years after the war, we lost touch. Decades later, I stumbled across his photo in a box at an estate sale. No label, no name, just his face, tucked under old receipts. I stared at that photo for a long time. It broke something in me. He had mattered. He had loved, laughed, saved lives. And yet now, just another forgotten smile in a dusty box. That's what death really is, I think. Not just an ending, but a vanishing. And in Buddhist thought, we often speak of ego death, the dissolution of identity, the understanding that we are not fixed, that all things pass. But while that truth offers freedom, it also stings, because we long to matter. We long to be remembered, not as accomplishments, but as people who once lived with heart. That's why I tell stories now, even the ones my children have heard 100 times, even when they smile and say, "Dad, you've told us that before." I tell them again, because I don't want to be remembered as someone who existed. I want to be remembered as someone who was, someone who laughed off key, who burned toast on purpose because he liked the crunch, who loved Margaret with a quiet, endless devotion, someone who stayed soft, even when life got hard. You see, death is not a problem to solve. It's a companion to walk beside. Some days we pretend it's not there. Some days we talk to it. Some days we feel it breathing gently on the back of our neck as we lie awake in the early hours of morning. But perhaps the point isn't to escape it. Perhaps the point is to live in such a way that when it comes, we have nothing left to fear, not because we found all the answers, but because we lived the questions fully. In Buddhism, there's a story of a woman who lost her only child. In grief, she approached the Buddha and begged him to bring her son back. He told her he would, if she could find one household that had never experienced death. She went door to door, and of course, every family had lost someone. That was the teaching. Death is not a punishment. It is part of the fabric we all wear. Not something to run from, but something to understand. I still don't know what comes next, and I've stopped trying to solve that mystery. But I do know this. If I can leave behind a memory that lingers in someone's smile, if my voice can echo, even softly, in the thoughts of someone I love, if my life made someone feel a little less alone, then that is enough. Maybe we don't need to be remembered forever. Maybe we just need to be remembered long enough for someone to say, he was here, he mattered, he loved deeply. And that to me is more sacred than any monument carved in stone. Part 5. The gift of small moments. I used to think that meaning came from what we built, what we accomplished, what we left behind for others to admire. Books with our name on the spine, careers that outlasted our working years, titles etched on plaques and certificates. I believed that significance lived in the visible, the celebrated, the acknowledged, the praised. But now, in the gentle stillness of these later years, I've come to see that the true treasures of life aren't found in grand achievements or final chapters. They're found in the middle of a sentence, in a pause, in a quiet glance shared across a dinner table. Meaning, it turns out, was never waiting at the finish line. It was hiding in plain sight, nestled into the folds of the everyday. There's a memory I come back to more often than I'd like to admit. It was my daughter's 8th birthday. She had balloons, a crooked cake with too much frosting, and a table full of friends. I, however, wasn't there. I was in my office finishing a chapter for a book I thought would change everything. I told myself I'd make it up to her, but the truth is, we rarely do. That book was never published. That moment never came again, and the look on her face when she asked where I was, that stayed with me far longer than any printed word ever could. We are taught to chase the big moments, graduations, promotions, celebrations, but I've come to learn that the small ones are where life actually happens. The first sip of coffee in the stillness of morning, the sound of rain tapping on the window, the way your partner's hand brushes yours in the hallway, wordlessly reminding you, I see you, I'm here. Not long ago, I watched a video from my son's wedding. Everyone was laughing, dancing, swaying to the music. There I was too, in the corner of the frame, holding up my phone, recording, but not smiling, not dancing, just documenting. I watched that version of myself and felt a wave of sadness rise. I wasn't really there. I had traded being in the moment for capturing it. And in trying to preserve the memory, I missed the magic of living it. It's easy to get swept up in doing, but there is something sacred in simply being present, not halfway, not distracted, but fully awake to the moment you're in. As Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese monk, once said, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. Now my calendar is mostly blank. My phone rings less, but I have never noticed more. The way the light spills across the hardwood floor at 4:30 in the afternoon, the smell of toast just before it pops, the sound of a child's laughter drifting in from a neighbor's yard. These are not background noises. These are invitations to pause, to breathe, to feel something quietly profound. We think we must do something great to matter, but sometimes greatness is hidden in the way we remember someone's favorite song, the way we listen without interrupting, the way we sit beside someone who is grieving and say nothing at all, just our presence saying, you're not alone. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it wouldn't be a piece of advice. It would be a whisper. Look up, breathe, slower, be here, because the moment you're in right now is the only one you're guaranteed, and that is everything. So if you're still running towards some distant horizon, chasing the version of yourself you think will finally be enough, I get it, I've done it too. But don't forget to look around, because beauty is not always in the arrival. Sometimes it's in the ordinary scene unfolding quietly in front of you. Sometimes it's in the smell of cinnamon, the creak of the porch, the soft sound of leaves falling outside your window. And if we can learn to pay attention, really pay attention, we might just discover that what we thought were small moments were actually the big ones all along. Part 6, Redefining Meaning. After a lifetime of chasing, there's a quiet ache that comes with realizing that everything you once believed gave your life meaning, titles, tasks, roles, was never meant to last. And yet, so many of us spend our best years chasing those very things. I know I did. I spent decades believing that my value came from how many students filled my lecture hall, how many pages bore my name, how many accolades followed my signature. My days were measured in productivity, my worth in relevance. And I'll admit, there was a kind of pride in that, a belief that I was building something solid, something that would last. But here's the truth I never expected. Meaning doesn't always come from what endures. Sometimes it comes from what dissolves, what softens, humbles, and finally invites us to see with different eyes. In retirement, when the applause fades and the titles are no longer needed, something strange begins to happen. You sit in your home, surrounded by the echoes of your own life, and ask yourself, what now? At first I tried to replace the old sense of purpose with new projects. Volunteer work, essays I never finished, a memoir draft I rewrote a dozen times. But every attempt to recapture that old fire felt hollow. The spark had changed, not gone, just different. And what I slowly came to understand was this: I was trying to chase meaning the way I used to, through effort, through recognition. But meaning now was showing up in a different form. It began in the smallest places, in the act of pouring tea slowly, without rushing, in the satisfaction of folding towels and aligning their corners, just so, in smiling at the birds who came to visit the garden each morning, as if they were old friends arriving on cue. I started to realize that what gives life its richness is not always tied to legacy, but to presence. It's not about how long our impact lasts, but how deeply we feel while we're here. And oddly enough, the quieter my life became, the more I could finally hear it. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from clinging to roles, to permanence, to ego. We become attached to our image of who we think we are, or who we believe we must be. But when those identities are stripped away, we're offered a rare and sacred opportunity to return to what's underneath it all, to discover the self that simply is, without title, without expectation, without performance. I remember sitting on the porch one evening, the sun setting in slow golden strokes across the field, when it struck me, I don't have to prove anything anymore. What a liberation that was. I didn't have to be impressive. I didn't have to be remembered. I just had to be honest, present, and kind. That shift changed everything. I began to approach each day, not as a test to pass, but as a gift to unwrap, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. There was meaning in the creak of the stairs beneath my feet, in the warmth of soup on a winter evening, in the act of writing a note to a grandchild and slipping it between the pages of a book for them to discover someday. None of it would go down in history, but all of it was sacred. And in these quieter years, I've come to believe that the point was never to matter to everyone. The point was to matter to someone, even just one. To show up fully, lovingly for the people in front of you. To witness their lives and let them witness yours, without pretense. So now, I let myself rest. I let myself forget things. I let myself laugh too long at silly jokes. I let myself cry at commercials, hum while I sweep the floor, and sit in silence without feeling the need to explain myself. I let go of the chase, because I've finally come to see a meaningful life isn't something you win. It's something you notice. It's not built in stone. It's whispered in the wind, reflected in a child's eyes, written in the quiet moments when no one else is looking. And in that stillness, I've found something I never thought I'd discover so late in life. Part 7. What remains, love, stillness, and the echoes we leave behind. There comes a time when the noise of the world grows quiet. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. The urgency that once propelled every morning, the checklists, the obligations, the endless doing, fades like morning mist, and in its place arises a stillness so profound, it almost hums. A different kind of rhythm begins to shape your days, one where the ticking clock is no longer a tyrant, but a gentle metronome marking the grace of being alive. And as everything else is stripped away, titles, routines, roles, even some relationships, you're left with one essential question: what remains? It's not the accomplishments, though they once seemed to define you. It's not the money, the accolades, the possessions. What remains is love. Not the grand, dramatic kind that makes headlines or movies, but the quiet, consistent love that lingers in a room after someone leaves. The love woven into the way you listened, the way you forgave, the way you showed up, over and over again, in small, invisible ways that only the heart could measure. I've come to realize that what we leave behind is not so much what we did, but how we made others feel. It's the warmth someone remembers in your laugh, the way you held their gaze a little longer when they were hurting, the tenderness in your silence when words were not needed. These are the echoes that outlast us. These are the footprints we leave in the soft soil of someone else's soul. I see Margaret in the wind, in the way the curtains move gently at dusk. I hear her in the creak of the floorboards and the old jazz tunes that float through the radio late at night. She is gone, yes, but she is not absent. Her love remains. It colors the world in subtle ways, an afterglow, a warmth, a whisper. In Buddhism, there's an understanding that the self is not fixed, not solid. We are a collection of impressions, of actions, of intentions. We are not defined by the body or by a name, but by the traces of kindness we leave behind. Karma, not as punishment or reward, but as continuation. We live on, not through monuments, but through moments. The moment we helped, the moment we listened, the moment we loved, even when it was hard. Sometimes when I sit on the porch and the light falls just right through the branches, I wonder what of me will remain, not in books or photos, but in the feeling someone gets when they stir a pot of soup and remember how I always added too much time, or when they laugh without restraint and think, Grandpa would have liked that. I no longer worry about being remembered by the world. The world forgets. It moves fast, but love lingers. It lingers in the softest places, and if I've managed to give enough of it patiently, gently, truly, then maybe that's all that needs to remain. In the end, what stays with us, what carries us through, is not certainty, not answers, not the neatly tied conclusions we once craved. It is presence. It is compassion. It is the echo of love that refuses to fade. And perhaps when the body becomes still and the breath grows quiet, what rises to greet us is not fear, but recognition, a knowing, a return, a smile, not from a stranger, but from something that has always been waiting within us, the part of us that was never born and never truly dies, the quiet wisdom that simply is. Conclusion: a whisper, a blessing. You are not fading, you are refining. What remains is enough. Through this quiet journey together, we've walked through the tender terrain of aging, not as something to resist, but as something to revere. We've explored the gradual loss of physical strength and the surprising clarity that often arises in its place. We've sat with the ache of absence, the empty chairs, the faded voices, the memories that echo where laughter used to live. We've opened our hearts to the presence of death, not as a shadow to run from, but as a silent teacher walking beside us. And we've come to see that meaning does not live in the spotlight or in the pages of our resumes. It lives in the sunlight falling on a kitchen table, in the tremble of a hand that still reaches out, in the pie baked each Friday for no one but the soul, in the breath we still get to take. If today's reflection stirred something in you, perhaps it's time to pause a little longer, to look up from your screen, to step outside and feel the air, to pick up the phone and call someone you love, to sit in silence, not to solve anything, but simply to listen to what life still wants to say. Ask yourself gently, what am I still carrying that's too heavy for this season of life? Whose name is waiting on my tongue, needing to be spoken before it's too late? What moment, what memory, What quiet beauty have I been walking past without noticing? Sometimes, all it takes is one deep breath and one soft yes to begin again. And aging, for all its grief and grace, gives us the rare chance to begin again, each and every day, with a little more presence and a little less pretense. So if this message found you in a quiet hour, if it met you where you are, tender, uncertain, or deeply still, I invite you to walk this path with us. Let this be a sanctuary where your questions are welcome, your silence is honored, and your story, yes, yours, is deeply cherished. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, Quiet Wisdom, so we can continue sharing these soft lanterns of reflection together. There's always room for one more at this fireside of the soul. And as we part for now, I leave you with this. May you live not in the shadows of what was, but in the sacred light of what still is. May your quiet moments be filled with meaning. May your ordinary days shine with invisible grace. And may your heart always remember, you are not alone on this path. Not now, not ever.